Three brave amigos are we.
Welcome back to this already the final segment of today's Price of Business. It's been a great one. Enjoyed spending time with you on this Monday. You know that music. It's 3 AM Egos, and they're here. Dan Shedd, intern extraordinaire, Sigmund Kramer, producer, and yourself, myself, rather. Yourself, too. Yeah. Myself.
It's Monday.
Price. It is Monday. And sadly, it will be Monday all day long. Gentlemen, glad to have you. What do you got for us? Let me just explain to the listener who's not familiar with this segment. We send Dan Shedd out to find witty, clever, interesting, sometimes irreverent, unfortunately sometimes irrelevant stories that should be humorous. He's got about a record, you know, they say a great hitter in baseball has got a 300 batting record. His is a little below that. But he keeps trying. He keeps on trying to find the next interesting story. Let's see how he did today. How you doing there, Dan?
I'm doing great, Kevin. How are y'all?
We're fine. What do you got?
Well, Pennsylvania middle school kids got a puzzle the other day that was based off the movie 50 Shades of Grey, where...
With that drama, I'll go ahead and chime in, Dan. Sigmund, get it. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, nothing says getting a good public school education like getting a semi-porn crossword puzzle to do in class, being sent to, what was it, 8th grade?
Yes, 8th graders.
With words such as bondage and... what? Spanking, yeah. They should all be used to that, right? No, not anymore.
No, not anymore. It's been a couple of generations. I'm not sure if I was even allowed to be spanked.
Oh, I was.
Yeah,
They're called the SWATs.
It so badly. I think they did a special ordinance.
True.
With the superintendent said, this kid, you know what, we don't do these things anymore, but
this kid, we'll make an exception. So what other words were in this? I mean, think about this. These are 8th graders. Their hormones are going crazy as it is, right? Like they need this to kind of fuel the fire. Come on.
Yeah. These poor guys who have only relatively recently got exposed to these kind of hormones anyway. That's weird. Doesn't that seem weird? Or am I just old school?
Well, Dan, specifically, go into the specifics more so the listeners who aren't familiar with 50 Shades of Grey or any of that, they can kind of understand the background.
Well, 50 Shades of Grey is by E.L. James, and it's basically about, it's a book and the movie was released recently, and it's about a college student and her affair with a billionaire with a penchant for bondage, discipline, sadism, and all that erotic stuff. So,
and actually, let's see. When you say bondage and all that, those are words that are in this word search, right?
Yes, we were talking about the words. Some of the words are spanking, submissive, leather cuffs, and bondage, and other words were more explicit. So,
yeah, and they actually had to kind of. I almost said rub them out. That's really the wrong term you want to use here.
You circle them.
Yeah, well, no. What I'm saying is they had to, when they did the news story, they had to blur out some of the words.
Really? Which ones? Which ones of these do they have to do it?
Well, they're blurred out, so I don't really know what.
Oh, man. I can't imagine. I mean, all these words on their own, like leather is not a bad word.
No. There were some words that were more explicit that we probably couldn't even say on radio.
What?
Yeah. So I mean, this stuff's going out to the school, to the kids, and they're coming home.
Hey, let me ask you guys: when was the last time you all did one of these word things anyway? Word finders. What year were you in school? I bet I was in 4th grade. What are they doing these things still in the 8th grade anyway?
Well, because nowadays 8th graders have like a 4th grader reading level, so it's probably.
Well, yeah. How far in school were you, Dan, still doing these things?
I really can't remember when the last time I did something like this in school, honestly.
Probably last week.
Thank you, Sigmund, for...
Hey, that's my job. You better watch that, Kramer.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, seriously, okay, so the teacher, and this is my take on it, was the teacher trolling, fishing, trying to get like some...
Recruit,
some
8th grade boy.
Some 8th grade boy or girl, yeah, to get, involved with? I mean, what was the thinking of the teacher to do this in her class? I'm assuming it was a her. If it was a guy, I can only imagine he'd be, like, strung up from his nether regions.
Oh, absolutely. He would have been treated like the pedophile that someone who would make a puzzle like this would seem to be.
Yeah. So, I mean...
This is under investigation, according to Fox News.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of like Brian Williams.
Yes. Kind of like.
You know, speaking of which, it's just getting worse for him every day. I mean, now he's been caught lying about saying that he ate just one Lay's potato chip.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a column at USDailyReview.com, this week's big story on Friday, and it was on, I call it the incredible shrinking Brian Williams. And it's how, they're now using Stalin-type techniques to get rid of Williams over at NBC. You remember how Stalin would have photos, there'd be people in the photo one time, and then they would republish the book, and the same photo, but that person would magically disappear.
Yeah.
And overnight, Brian, it went from Brian is, taking a break while we investigate to Brian is, in fact, on a 6-month suspension, and then overnight, no branding anywhere related to Brian Williams on anything. If you watch the beginning, it's NBC Nightly News logo, both in front of Lester Williams at his desk, at his news desk. When it comes on, there is absolutely now no mention of Brian Williams at all.
Well, it's amazing. I wonder if he's got a lunchbox like the, NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams. If anyone's got like a lunchbox, it's going to be really collectible.
Oh my God! I'm going to go look at eBay right now or Amazon.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I mean, we ought to make them. Let's make them now, limited edition.
We should.
Real limited edition.
We should, yeah, real. It's funny because apparently, I got to tell you, I got to read you this real quick. Brian Williams may have lied about meeting the Pope and watching the Berlin Wall come down. He said in an interview on NBC News, published by NBC News, I have to begin with a beautiful day in 1979. I was a student at Catholic University and over the course of 2 hours chatted up a Secret Service agent who spilled like a cup of coffee and told me the Pope would be coming our way, straight up the steps of a side door at the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. I positioned myself and held out my hand and said, "Welcome to Catholic University, Holy Father," and he embraced my hand with both of his, made the sign of the cross, and said a blessing to me. The same year, he told Esquire he met the Pope simply by being in the right place at the right time, not thanks to a chatty Secret Service agent. And then the same kind of deal went down at the Brandenburg Gate the night the wall came down. Since 2008, he's been claiming he was there. Williams did indeed witness some of the wall's physical removal, but the night the wall came down is widely recognized as November 9th, 1989. An iconic date with a particular significance to Williams' nightly news predecessor, Tom Brokaw. Brokaw was famously the only American anchorman to report live from the scene on that historic day, an accomplishment that NBC News has proudly trumpeted for years. It was a defining moment for Brokaw.
You're nailing why I don't see how Brian Williams can go back. I don't see it. There's only one thing he's got to be pretty darn close to perfect, and that's on the reporting of things that he has seen, reporting of the things he's experienced. So about the only thing, there's room for all other kinds of errors. And so when you start finding flaws that are blatant in his recall of things, you begin to find yourself in a position where you can't believe him in anything.
In anything, yeah. I mean, specifically on the Berlin Wall thing, he said, I got there, I have my own piece of the wall. He said he was there like a day, maybe 12 hours after Tom Brokaw was there. But then, just last year in November, here's what he said. Here's a fact. 25 years ago tonight, Tom Brokaw and I were at the Berlin Wall, Williams said at a gala held on November 8th, 2014. Is it just misremembering, or is it, I think it's basically Kevin, I think that in the future, we have Paul Bunyan. Now we have Brian Williams. He's going to be a tall tale.
Yeah. It's too bad it's the last segment because I probably would have you exit with Cocaine by Eric Clapton because you're asking why this is happening.
You don't lie. You don't lie.
What's interesting about this segment is that it's the millennials' attitude towards him. And in fact, I have a writer that I really love who essentially quit last week because she wanted to write a defense of Brian Williams as this week's big story, which, I don't think that was the appropriate, and as the editor, I'm going to say it's not the appropriate response. But she essentially quit because she didn't like that I didn't want her to go there.
Could she not have done like just an opinion piece, an op-ed piece?
Yeah, I said, you know what? I'm perfectly fine you doing that separately. I'd love to have, and she's a millennial like Dan Shedd is, and it's a millennial thing. The millennials want to just go, let bygones be bygones, forget about it, go on.
Well, but
Dan, explain that. This is the second time I've asked you, and you really haven't really explained why, from a millennial mind, why are millennials so easygoing on such a heinous thing by a person in this profession?
I think it's just because, we don't, I don't know. We see, people getting second chances, and it's just like, all right, he made a mistake, possibly, but...
Possibly? Now, wait a minute. He's even admitted repeatedly to making a mistake. So don't backtrack for him when he won't backtrack himself.
I don't know.
Well, hold on.
I don't really care. Honestly, it is, wrong for him to lie to the American people, but at the same time, it's like, us millennials really don't care all that much.
Now, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
You hear what he just said? We don't care.
We don't care.
Can I tell you why, in my opinion?
Go ahead.
Honestly,
it rings like mine, but go ahead.
Honestly, I am not trying to be partisan. I think so much of this stems from the Monica Lewinsky affair and Bill Clinton in the mid-'90s, when all we heard about, because they were defending him, of course they were defending him in the media, all we heard about was how lying is actually good for you. Lying is actually a good thing because it helps, to just not hurt other people's feelings. We heard, all sorts of things that brought down the standards. And I really honestly believe that what we're witnessing is a lowering of the standards of what is expected of people in terms of having veracity, in terms of having principled behavior. All those standards were lowered because our president, who
I wish he were that powerful. That person would not have made that kind of claim if it wasn't a part of a long-term education system that had been heading south for generations, and I think it was embodied. One of the greatest indictments against it was Alan Bloom's book, The Closing of the American Mind. And in that book, Alan Bloom describes how higher education has failed democracy and impoverished the souls of today's students.
Well,
he talks especially about the openness of relativism as leading paradoxically to the great closing reference in the title book's titles. This relativism that, what is truth anyway, this generation doesn't even believe in absolutes, the vast majority of them. I really think it's made a very wishy-washy population.
No doubt. No doubt. Moral relativism, it's being taught in schools, but it's also, bombarding everybody in the media. Whether it be on TV shows from Hollywood or whether it be actually, on the news broadcasts. I mean, when you have news stories, when you have anchors, when you have reporters, they're all coming out and they're saying that, lying, the stories are coming out saying lying is not a big deal. By the way, oral sex isn't sex. Look at what that alone did to children growing up in that era and their attitudes about sex. I mean, you started hearing all sorts of stories about the kids doing these acts in class.
Right.
And now it's even more pervasive because technology has caught up and made it even easier with sexting, with the internet. So, I mean, honestly, I don't see there's any evidence that our cultural and moral standards haven't been lowered. And therefore, things like this, to a millennial, the Brian Williams scandal, it's not a scandal. It's no big deal. It's a Monday.
This business as usual. Got to wrap it up on that point. Do you want to mention that there will be links to the article that Dan brought, to the program this morning? There will be a link to the latest this week's big story that I actually wrote over at usdailyreview.com. But I also noticed you wanted to talk about the dog that traveled 20-something blocks to see its owner, and it's a very touching story of his owner in the hospital. We didn't have enough time to go into that, but please include that link because it's such a great story. So include that as well, Dan said.
All right, will do.
All right, gentlemen. With that, I do want to remind the listener the best content here can be found over there at usdailyreview.com. The information covered by Dan and this group can be found over at priceofbusiness.com. And I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. I hope you spend it wisely right here on this great station.